Hello folks, I'm L.A. Little, and this is your daily TA wrap. Where we take a look at these markets from a neoclassical perspective and ask ourselves, what happened today? And what might it tell us about tomorrow? I do the show 4 times a week, Monday through Thursday, live at 9 o'clock Eastern Time here from the base of the beautiful Rocky Mountains. Folks, I'm glad you could join me. Markets leaving a lot of tells on the tape. Usually tells are a signal that the other side has control. And what we'll do is we'll look at that here as we get through these numbers, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. But all in all, the market continues to be resilient. Doesn't want to go down. Industrial's up 16.5, 14,841. S&P's tacked on 3, 1638. We had the composite up 36.20. That's 0.75%. The NDX a little bit less. 30.93 was the close. 21 higher. And the Russell tacked on 10. It was the leader. Percent higher. 10.27. So the strong sectors, strong indexes, right? The NDX, the Russell, the composite, these guys just don't want to come back. And then you got the weaker guys, SPX and the industrials in particular, that just can't find any buyers. And so you've got this tug of war where one side just doesn't want to come in, the other side just can't go up. And it continues to lead to a lot of angst, if you will, on the tape. But on the tape last night, if you remember, I was talking about this market was very mixed. We had indexes looking like they might want to go lower. In particular, the S&P's failing last night into that low, which is the B point now on an ABCD down. What do we do today? Well, we go into it, we get deeper into it, and there's those tails I'm talking about. Where are the tails? They're on top side. Usually a tail is not a good sign, especially if they start showing up in multiples. Doesn't always work, but a lot of times it does. Anyway, what it says is that the buyers had control early, but by the end of the day, the sellers had pushed it right back to where it was, leaving, quote-unquote, the tail at the top. The key thing, though, is this bottom, 1639.43. You close 1638, so you're back underneath it, right? Under the low. You close under it. Volume was 29.3. You did 25.2. That's 2 days in a row. You push into it. You can't get over it. You can't stay in it even. That's pushing into resistance, failing. This thing still wants to come back down. That's the S&P. We look at the Dow. Now remember, the Dow last night couldn't even get into that bar. Today it did. High today. What do we got here? 14,916. You did 931. You went into 983. The low there was 14,880. You close underneath it, so you go into it, and there wasn't much volume there. You go into the B point. You test it. You fail. You want to go back down. So the two listed issues still say lower. Let's go to the strong guys, NDX. Now if we look at the NDX looks a little bit different, although it still has a failure. And the NDX, what was it doing? Well, you got to go back and you got to think about the idea that you have 3 zones here. You got a top zone that is really the bottom price of that top zone. Let me get this up a little bit farther. The bottom price of that top zone is easily defined by this bar. That's your August 13th bar. The bottom is about 31.06. The next zone is from there down to the bottom of these bars, and roughly in this area. We'll take the lowest one here, which is about 30.53. So 31.06 down to 30.53, and then the bottom of that is what you see as the bottom of the support zone. That's about 30.30. So you have these three zones. What did you do today? You go into the higher zone, or at least you try to get into it and get over it. That, if you remember that, you got a little island top up here. This thing tries to go back, gets into the gap, right? They push it back by the end of the day. Volume on the bar is trying to get back over and into the gap. Now, anytime you have a gap, this bar really extends back up to where the gap was. And so that becomes kind of a key bar. That gap area is part of it. 3102.27, I like to use the highs of the gap area because that's where you're going to find sellers initially. So they go into it, you got 16.4 there, you pop into it with 13.4. Folks, it's a failure. It's a failure to get back up there. This thing's going to try to come back down and test the other side now. It's amazing how this tape changes day to day. Composite. Same principle. What is it? And there's really just two zones on this one. You got the upper area that's up here, defined again by that same bar, August 13th, and then you have the lower area. What does it do? It goes up into that guy, doesn't have the volume, gets over it, back under it, closes under it, failure. So failure on 4 of them. Let's see what the Russell did. And the Russell actually didn't get a failure. The Russell, just an inside day. So 4 of the 5 saying they're going to try to trade back down the other way. So tomorrow I would expect to see that kind of action, pressure on these markets back down the other way. Now, the sectors, remember they were stronger last night, and they were the ones giving us the mixed picture, telling us that in fact this market may try to push higher again today, which is what it did. And it was a toss-up last night. IYT, is hanging onto this area where the support is. You already had a break of this swing point here. Volume there fairly heavy, 722. You went into it, you didn't have the volume. You pushed up now, you went over it, right? Top of it, 113.55. You went over it. You're trying to get back up into this and into this resistance zone. The top of it is defined over here at 1441. You get into it, you have pretty good decent volume, right? So you got big bars at the top now. You broke under them, so now they become anchored resistance above you. You go into the anchored resistance. You had decent volume. You may try again tomorrow, but you failed today. The SOX. The SOX had an AB. Now remember, we had multiple ABCDs down on sectors. 3 or 4 of them finished, and the 2 or 3 that hadn't actually pushed back over and kind of didn't invalidate, because I don't know that really invalidates the ABCD down, but it actually delays it if it's going to happen. To invalidate it, you actually got to trade much higher than just the B point. SOX had an ABCD down, came up, tested yesterday, came up again today and tested. Doesn't have much volume, but it's got enough to go into this bar. That bar is 63.18, so we may see the SOX try to push a little bit higher, but that one still looks like it's going to try to come back to. XL, well, I was going to go to the XLB, but I'll do the XLE first. Now, this one was the first one to give us an ABCD up, and today they take that away, and they go the other way, and volume's fairly heavy on the way back. It is an inside day, though, so tomorrow will tell the tape on this one, but the B point, which was here on August 26th, you're back into that B point, and you're into it pretty deep. You probably will test that bottom if you haven't already. 81.46, 81, went right to it, and it's got the volume. That tells me this thing's probably going to fail, and then the ABC isn't going to happen on the upside. Now let's go back to the materials I skipped. So on the materials, they broke this swing point low prior. They got down into that area yesterday. They got into the area again today. They couldn't break it down. Volume on that bottom is 4.8. We did 4. This looks like it could try to test again. So it tested into, so this high that's anchoring it, 40.74, you did 8.4. You did 4, and you got the 40.74. That's a failure. That one gave you the signal today. It failed, and it's going to try to come down. So XLB is going to try to push lower. XLE looks like it's going to. SOX could go up a little bit higher. IYT looked like a failure, but it's not that clean. XLF, the banking stocks, TELS look just like the SPX. They can't get anything going. They're trying to trade lower. Now remember, they just finished an ABCD, so what do? They get a little bounce. What do they have now? They have another potential ABCD down if they start breaking underneath this low. So you can see what happens once you get the extension down, right? Then you can take a rest, right? And in this case, you push up, but you can't go anywhere. What does that do? It sets up another ABCD down potential. So you can see how one can lead to another. Once they start doing this, until you start turning up 2 or 3 of them and actually getting bullish ABCDs, you can just keep going, and that's this one's starting to set up that way. XLI. So XLF actually fails at a resistance and is potentially setting up another ABCD down. This one had just finished an ABCD as well, goes up, gets over it, gets a higher low, higher high on the prior bar. That can also be another ABCD down. There's no volume, it's just trying to bounce as it goes into resistance. And it didn't even get to the top of that bar. So this also looks like it's setting up an ABCD down. Well, it's certainly a potential one. We'll have to see if it dropped. So if you get pressure, tomorrow's Friday, you got the Syrian situation on the table, gonna make it very hard for people to buy tomorrow, right? Unless there's some resolution, and there's probably not going to be a resolution tomorrow. Given that uncertainty hangs, plus you have all the other uncertainties that are out there. This market is going to have extreme difficulty getting higher. The question is will people sell? So far, for the most part, they don't want to sell. XLK setting up an ABCD down, goes up into resistance, fails, potential ABCD down as well. If you get pressure and this market does trade lower, SPX is going to try to finish, and all these sectors are going to do their ABCDs down. XLP got down almost to the bottom, not quite there. It's trying to get to this price point. Got a little bounce today, not much in it. Goes over the prior day, back over under it. That one still is having trouble. So it was going back into resistance, couldn't go anywhere. So that one still wants to finish off the ABCD down. Utilities are just trying to get it going again. They're sitting there hanging. The XLV is trying to push higher. This one also had an ABCD down. It's more or less invalidated right now. And it can push down again, but there's nothing that tells us it will. And the XLY is exactly in the same position. So they've gone set up ABCDs and push back into the B points. For example, in this one, the B point was here. You push back into it. So again, I think the key thing is, what do the indexes do? It's going to be very hard to move higher. The question is will they sell down? Will they sell down and continue on to finish off the ABCDs that are set up in those indexes, the SPX and the Dow Jones? If they do, these sectors are going to break. They're going to finish off their ABCDs, and then they're all going to finish off about the same time if that's what happens. Now, last night we didn't have anything in the OX markets to tell us that in fact this was going to happen. Tonight, you actually have the TLT saying the same thing. TLT, what does it do? It goes back yesterday, doesn't have any volume, right? What does it do? It flips around today, comes back up, 106.25, it gets to 106.31, 6.9, 11.5. You're still going into, let's see, which bar was it? It was this one, the swing point low. It's testing. This is the retest regen. It's going into the top, which is 106.49. Again, can't get to the top. Volume low, there's 12.8. This is a failure. This is a failure to get back and actually, well, let me say it a different way. It's a retest regenerate. It's a success so far on the regenerate lower. It's a failure to get higher, right? And you had a good move up. You don't have the juice today. Going into the bar, even going into this bar, it fails in both cases. This thing's going to try to come back. Interest rates going up has been bad for the market. So that is also telling the same tape. Then we go to the precious metals. These guys are starting to come off. Now, I don't think that they have anything to do with the rest of the tape right now. They're kind of in their own world, but they're filling their gaps. These things are trying to come back. There was no volume today on the gold. If I go look at the silver itself, though, had a little bit of juice on the way back, not as much as yesterday. These are just settling out. I expect they're going to get back to the breakout bars out of this little consolidation area, and then we'll have to see what they're going to do. That's where their support's going to be. You can see it sitting there. They're just going to drift back down. They just had a heck of a run, folks. So they're going to take a break. And then when they come back up, then we'll see if they really have more to them or not. They're kind of in their own world, though. But let's look at the other commodities that we typically watch. Copper comes off. There's no volume, but it's coming off. Remember, on a weekly basis, copper is still trying to get back to do retest regens. They just got into this low again. The ones that they haven't done anything about are the prior ones. And, you know, they had a nice volume spike on the way up, but now they're coming back down the other way. So copper's still not telling us that, you know, the world is great in terms of growth or anything. And I don't know anymore that copper tells us that because, you know, so much of copper's been replaced with plastic and so forth, but it's still looked at that way. The other big story today, though, was oil. So we got all the Syrian situation. We had the huge spikes up. I've been suggesting, now typically when you break multiple swing points, you're going to get an extension. But the way this looked was a little different. And if you looked at what was happening in the general markets, you were wondering if this could continue. It looks like it isn't going to continue, and it is going to actually come back despite all the worries. And that's because we just blew all the stops out and you didn't have any more buyers. And you can kind of tell that when you look at this. First you got a doji, big breakout with a doji. Usually you'll want something a little stronger than that. Then the next day, you got a dark candle on the next day. And then today, of course, you start to come off. Now, the volume's not there as you're coming back, but you didn't have any volume on these swing points that you went over. Well, you had it on one, but not on the others. But still, the volume coming back, for example, on the highest one, that top is 38.41. You're doing 8.7 over there. You're coming back with 8. And you're at 30, where do we close at? 38.58. Yeah, so you're almost into it, right? So tomorrow will be the tell. Do you get enough volume to break back into that or not? That's a good support zone there. I wouldn't be surprised if this thing hangs, especially with all the noise going over overseas. But you can see this. It's having a very hard. The demand really isn't there. This is political. The drive is political. And it's not supply-demand equation. In commodities, you know, it really is supply and demand, much more than even stocks. Stocks can move. I mean, it's all supply and demand, right? But what I mean by it is, how much of the commodity are you actually using? With a stock, it's a little different. It's not as if there's a limit to, you know, there's some cap on how much of it there is, and that drives the price, right? You only have so much oil. How much are you using? And that has a lot to do with the prices on commodities. Okay, so that's oil. Now let's go to the dollar. The dollar actually pushes up. This high had a 22.16 mark. We got over it. Volume over there, 1.6. You only did 786, right? So you're doing less volume. You get a doji. That looks like a failure. Okay, that looks like a failure at this price point to get higher. Now this can all change because right now I think the dollar is I was alluding to it earlier in the week that I was surprised the dollar wasn't picking up, right? It was down here stalemated. And I was surprised because you would think the money would go to quote-unquote safe havens. Dollar is a safe haven based on what's happening geopolitically. Today you got the bounce up. So just like in oil, this one is not being driven by the demand equation nearly as much, even though you have all the geopolitical. So that says that, you know, this may or may not be able to push higher. So let's look at the FXE. Matter of fact, that's a failure on that chart. FXE also comes down, does a doji, doesn't go anywhere today. It's coming in this low, didn't quite get to it. 130.75, 130.87. Yeah, they can hang down here, but it looks like they're going to reverse and try to close their gaps. And I think those are the main ones. I want to look at real quick at the junk bonds. Actually, that's not bad. They're into resistance, so they're going to change that up. The next test here is this bar, 39.82. That would be a big test if it can get into that one again, because now you have the potential for actually a shift, right? A swing point high here. You could shift back to a bullish mode. All right, so DBA real quick, and pulling back more. And again, I think this is making a bottom finally. All right, let me see if you have some questions. Before I take those, I want to quickly just review where we're at. ABCD's down. They have like 1.5% to go. Anywhere from 1%, 0.5% to about 1.5%. On the indexes, it's about 1%. These new ABCDs that are trying to set up, you know, their projections aren't going to be huge, but they're a good 1.5%, 2%. The geopolitical situation is tough right now for the market. And then you've got all the other stuff that's still out there. And then on top of all that, you're starting to get your economic news. Today we got the GDP. GDP was much stronger than we expected, right? So GDP is much stronger. That says that the Fed probably will ease. You know, we'll not ease. We'll take the foot off the pedal and do tapering, right? Do tapering. That should drive gold and stuff down. It does a little bit. That should hurt the market. Didn't seem to today. Or at least that's been the mindset, right? You're going to taper, the market's going to get hit. So you've got a lot of economic news here on top of all the geopolitical, and it's going to heat up over the next 3 or 4 sessions. And we're off Monday. So again, Friday, tomorrow is going to be a tough day to anybody to buy with a 3-day weekend in front of a geopolitical event. I don't think so. I ain't buying. I don't know about you. You know, do you think people would commit a bunch of money? On the flip side, are you going to sell? Maybe. You know, you're going to short sell. You're probably not going to want to short sell. You may hedge some. So I think you're just seeing, and you're also in the middle of summer when there's no volume to start with. And so I think you're going to see a very tough time for this market to move up. The real question is, will it break lower? If it breaks lower, you could get some cascade selling. That's where the risk is coming in tomorrow. Let's see what the questions are here. So if you're short IWM, and if we can't break below the lows on the indexes, would you hold the position over the weekend, the lows from this week? I wouldn't be holding naked shorts here in general, right? And we can actually, let me go back to the indexes. We can talk about that concept just a little bit, because, you know, there are times when I'm strictly long or I'm strictly short, right? But to do that, you need the market to work with you. I mean, you need the setup there, right? If we pull this back and we look at it, this is a bullish trend, right? Can it get a further pullback? I mean, we've already pulled back. Top was 1709, and we're trading at 1627 on a low. So I don't know, you'd have to do the math, but that's roughly 90 points if I did the math right. 80 points. So it's about 82 points. Okay, 82 into 16, or you know, what is that? 5, 6, 7. It's about 7 times. I don't know. You have to do the math. But still, I mean, we're probably talking 4% or something off the top. Somebody can do the math for me. You know, that's a decent pullback. You got support right here. This thing doesn't have to pull back any farther. Even if it does, it's probably going to pull back just enough to finish off those ABCDs and then flip around, at least for a bounce. So, do you want to be naked short in that kind of a situation where you're looking for maybe another 1-2%? I think that's risky, you know, because as I just said, it doesn't have to pull back anymore. Yeah, there were ABCDs. Yeah, they're still unfinished. Yeah, it's still struggling, but it hasn't done it. You're over on the IWM, and the IWM hasn't even shown you an ABCD down yet. Now, if it does break tomorrow, that would be a heck of a break, matter of fact, because it pushed up 1% today, so it'd have to break about 1.5% or more tomorrow to get under there. Most likely, it's only going to come back to do the retest regen, which is about, I think we said 1,003. So if it breaks tomorrow, even if it breaks, right, you're only talking about, well, this swing point high is a little different. So this is 99.80, right? Even if it breaks tomorrow, you're only talking about another 70 cents on the IWM. And so no, I mean, the answer would be no. If you're naked short, no, I wouldn't be. I certainly wouldn't be holding. If you get a push down tomorrow, I'd be taking my money. The more worrisome thing is if it don't push down, right? So we'll see what it does tomorrow. I suspect tomorrow you're going to see some pressure though, and we'll see if it breaks. Okay, I think I've given you everything I can give you for the night. As always, I thank you for being there. I do a service. I offer this service. You know, I tune you into what's happening. I show you how to do the reads. I do this on a regular basis for all of my subscribers. Send them you know, updates each morning. Tell them what's going on. Have a portfolio for them to monitor. You know, there's a portfolio here that they can monitor. They can see how to trade. They go in here to the TNT room. They learn how to trade. There's some great traders in there. I come in there as often as I can. Sometimes I'm in there enough to do some trades with them and show them how it works. There's a lot of stuff here, folks. If you haven't tried us out, come over here and get a free trial. All right, it's 2 weeks. Doesn't cost you a penny. Just check it out. And 2 weeks is enough for you to get your feet wet and find out if there's anything here of value. I believe we got the best tool set out there, and it's just getting better. So if you have time, if you have the inclination, you want to learn how to trade, and you want to be consistently profitable, check us out. I'm L.A. Little. This is and was your daily TA wrap. You have yourself a great night, and I'll see you. Well, Sunday's going to be interesting. I'll do the Sunday wrap, but we won't have a show Monday. So we'll have a Sunday show. I'll see you then. Good night.